What experience caused you to believe in the paranormal? I've been paranoid all my life, so it's normal for me to hear or see things. I also have nightmares regularly. So when something happens, I think it's my imagination, yet things have happened to me that I'm sure were real. The first was when I was 13 to 14 years old. I was at a funeral and I had to pee. The bathroom was the most terrifying I'd ever seen. It was too big. There was a closed door that led to a totally dark room, I don't know why it was there, and behind the toilet was a typical horror movie bathtub. As soon as I entered, I thought about turning around and leaving, but I definitely had to go to the bathroom, so I walked to the toilet, it was about 3 or 4 meters from the front door, and tried to pee. From the toilet, I had a view of the dark room and was sure something was looking at me. I was also afraid that something would come out of the bathroom due to watching horror movies. I tried not to think about this, and finally, I started to urinate. It was there, when I was most vulnerable, that I heard someone walking beside me, making as much noise as possible, like when a cowboy walks into the tavern and only his boots are heard and stops behind me. I tried to think that it was nothing and that I shouldn't turn around, but I couldn't help it. Fortunately, there was nobody, but when I turned around, I began to feel dizzy. In a single second, my vision blurred until I saw everything in black, except for a red symbol in the center of my vision. After a few seconds, I came back to myself and left that bathroom immediately. I know this isn't an amazing or too scary story, but after that, I started to feel fear for bathrooms. My boyfriend, 2-month-old daughter, and I lived in Port Perry, Ontario in a 2-bedroom apartment. The people that used to live in our unit moved into the 3-bedroom unit right next to us. I started noticing weird things like lights being on when I had them off, cupboards opened, things moved or flipped upside down. Now I'm pretty strict about my lights being off because hydro in Ontario is high, and strict about my place being clean, but I chalked it up to postpartum exhaustion and hormones. Until I left for the day with my friend, and when I came home, all of my lights were on, all of my cupboards were open, and all of my doors were open. First I thought, okay, well my BF is home, nope, he was at work. When I called him, he automatically assumed that it was the neighbors, they did kind of look like junkies coming into our place, and they might have a key, and I thought, well, what about the landlord? So me trying to be clever, set up my laptop camera to look at the door, and before I left, put baby powder down on the ground to see if there were any footprints while I was gone. I left for about an hour to grab groceries and when I came back, no marks on the baby powder and camera still rolling. Nothing looked out of place, no lights or anything on, everything looked normal. I watched the video and nothing moved, but there was a smash kind of sound, but that could have been anything. I didn't put any thought into it since there were a lot of units and we lived on a main street. So I put my daughter for a nap, got up to go to the bathroom, and oh my god, all of my makeup, face wash, soap, and counters stuff was everywhere, like a tornado ripped through my bathroom. I tripped the flurbo out, like either there is some scary thing happening or someone was just in here. After that, I became like high alert and made sure I always shut lights off, closed everything, and sure as heck man, 2 days after that, I was playing COD in my living room, daughter sleeping, and I hear like a clinging sound coming from my kitchen. Turned the lights on, and one of my cupboards is open and 3 glasses sitting on the counter, BTW, I never used glass cups, never liked them. So needless to say, I was fleabing freaked out. I ended up talking to the neighbor about whether or not she had issues with the landlord entering the unit, and she gave me this weird look and asked, why? Things out of place? Basically she was dealing with the same exact thing. She contacted the landlord about it and he laughed, saying it's always been like that, and there is a haunted restaurant next door. Now the haunted restaurant is real, and it's called Jester's Court. I lived there for about 4 more months after that and constantly had similar issues with zero explanation. A few different things, in my old house growing up, we always saw a shadow figure and it made itself known. It would take up a whole doorway or stand on the stair landing. If enough people want me to I can get into a bit more detail on that one. A second one was at my best friend's house in her basement. She and I were watching a movie when we both stopped and looked in the same direction. I started seeing splotches of black, kind of in the shape of a person floating. But once I could make out one splotch, it disappeared and another reappeared. I couldn't see it at the same time. I have no idea how to describe it. Turns out, she saw the same thing. Even with all the stuff that happened in my childhood. That last one really solidified it for me. Now I'm going to start by saying, I don't talk about this often for fear that people won't believe me. Everything I'm about to tell you did happen, and I'm going to try and remember it as best as I can as it's been over 10 years. So I may have forgotten a few details. If I remember them, I'll get back to you. But my siblings and I lived in this house from age 7 to 18, all three of us are the same age. It started when we were younger. I would get a really bad feeling walking by my sister's room at night and would not look down the stairs to our landing, which was brightly lit by a window. The fear I had was more than what I would describe a normal, monsters under the bed, fear you have as a kid. As we grew older, it started to show itself more. My sister saw a tall shadow figure standing in her doorway all the time. It took up the whole doorframe and had long fingers. It never did anything, just stood there. Around this same time, I'd wake up at night and feel something watching me and would sometimes only see black when I opened my eyes, even if I was facing the window. As we got older, our dad grew more abusive and the family got more torn-apart and yada yada, so then things got weirder. The shadow figure started standing next to my sister's bed rather than the doorway. And it happened all the time. But my sister is a boss and didn't let it really bug her. I started having nightmares where I would wake up with my face pressed against the ceiling and I'd be stuck before falling back on my bed and waking up, and I swear, there were a few times where I woke up on top of my blankets when I had fallen asleep under them. Another time, I remember looking up at my ceiling and seeing the black figure using its hands and feet to hold itself up in the corner of my room, but I'm pretty sure that was a nightmare, but I won't doubt it could have happened too. The last few years at that house were the worst. I had a friend who refused to come over because she had seen a man standing on our staircase when she went to use the bathroom. I was sitting with another friend in my basement when her hair moved for no reason, and she looked at me kind of weird and asked if I had ran my fingers through her hair. I said, no, why? And then she just took off and ran upstairs. My sister, because she's a fleabing beast, started to get really irritated with this thing waking her up at night. So if it was in her doorway, she would get out of bed and run at it. At this point, my dad started sleeping in the basement as well, and something punched him in the face. The story that solidifies this whole thing for me as my family not being crazy though, is this. I was laying in bed one day when I looked into the hallway and I saw a black figure slowly carrying my brother down the stairs. I was 16 at the time, so old enough to understand that I was probably just really tired and I didn't actually see that. Then the next morning, my sister said she had a nightmare that something took my brother and carried him downstairs and into the basement. It wasn't until years later when my brother admitted he had an out-of-body experience and watched a man bring him downstairs and there was nothing he could do to stop him. I was 15 and home alone all summer. My parents were at work and my sister at a babysitter's. One morning that summer, I was watching TV in the living room and wanted a snack. So I walked to the fridge and saw a little girl with blonde hair in a red dress sitting at the breakfast bar facing away from me, towards the back of the kitchen. I just thought it was my sister. It was only when I stepped over the doorway, back into the living room, did it dawn on me that my sister wasn't home. I peeked into the kitchen and no one was there. Around 1 p.m., my mum comes home for lunch as she works a 5-minute drive away. Before I get the chance to say anything, she says that she had a really weird dream the night before. In her dream, she was lying awake in bed and at the foot of the bed was a little blonde girl wearing a red dress facing away from her. Neither of us have ever seen the little girl again, but I definitely now believe in the paranormal. Me and my mom were home alone and heard voices. We were in the living room at the time. She thought she left the TV on in her room at the end of the hall. But we got up to check, and it was clearly not on as we approached the room, and then the light whispers turned into a child's laugh, which freaked me the flurbo out. It was just loud enough to plainly hear. As we approached the room, her closet was open, which was normal, but I asked if it was coming from the closet. As a child, you tend to think these things. As soon as I said that, I saw a shadow dart across the closet floor into the corner. We both gasped and she closed the bedroom door, picked me up and began running out of the apartment. The door didn't close all the way and it was slowly opening, and I could just barely see in over her shoulder as she carried me, and there was the silhouette of what was clearly a person or child crouched in the corner of the closet. It moved in such a way that it almost looked like an animation, which was weird. It wasn't fast or moved, but it was very weird as I remember it. We moved apartments later that year. I looked after kids in a nursery and a ski resort. One kid kept talking about people around the room. Mainly an angry woman in a gray dress and a little boy in the corner. I just though, lol, kids are weird, and moved on. Families only stay for a week and then leave before the next lot arrive. 2 weeks later, we have a fresh batch of kids, and on the first day, a pretty distressed boy comes and complains about the angry dress woman and the boy with the ball, and then points to the exact same blank corner as previous kid. To make matters worse, apparently, the angry dress lady keeps staring at you. When I was about 5 or 6, my grandmother lived in this tiny little house. You know, one bed, one bath type thing. And my brother and I would visit over the summers when we were younger and actually got along with her. Anyways, there was one night that we were all sitting around watching TV, I was starting to feel sick, and my grams told me to go lay down in her bed until she and my brother were done watching TV. Well, I did, and I fell asleep almost instantly. But while I was sleeping, I was having this horrible nightmare that had woken me up and basically left me in a sleep paralysis stage, and this thing was just standing in the corner. I couldn't move, couldn't speak, and it just kept getting closer. The more I tried to close my eyes, the more they felt they stretched open. I still haven't forgotten the way the thing looked, and I haven't had an experience with that thing since, but I've had other hauntings, but that stuck the most. There were a couple of things that happened. 1. There was a time where my younger brother refused to sleep in his own bed, and we are still not sure why. One night, he was in bed with me completely out. I had my door open and the hall light on so he could see when he needed to go to the bathroom. Around midnight, I heard some very heavy footsteps coming down the hall. Initially, I thought it was my stepdad. I had my back to the door and was waiting for the shadow on the wall. Only there was no shadow as I heard the footsteps stop outside my doorframe. After a bit, the footsteps went back down hall and down the stairs. I was honestly terrified, but just sort of brushed it off, thinking it was just my stepdad. The next morning, I go and ask both him and my mom if they had gotten up in the middle of the night to check on us, and both of them said no. Some spooky stuff. 2. I have a smoke detector right inside and outside my door. Why? IDFK. By this point, I was sleeping with my door closed. In the middle of the night, the smoke alarm in my room starts going off. I thought it was just someone downstairs messing around in the kitchen and accidentally set off the alarms. No. It was just mine going off. No one could figure out why either. Nothing was wrong with the wiring, batteries had just been changed, nothing. This happened again later in the year, except it was the one right outside my room. After all of this, I completely stopped letting myself be open to energies, spirits, ghosts. Haven't had an issue since. I still believe though,